first light the city exhales, and the air itself turns to vinegar. You step into a Victorian market that feels less like a street and more like a spell. Glass towers gleam, columns of brine, amber and green catching sun the way stained glass catches prayer. Inside them, cucumbers standing like soldiers, onions like moons, walnuts black as inked pearls. An eel sleeps in a coil, as if the jar were a clock that wound it shut. People pass and murmur. The stallholders chant recipes as though they were charms. Here, preservation is not a habit. It is a creed. Vinegar promises what the century fears it cannot keep. Time tamed. No icebox hums behind a door. No understanding of microbes walks the streets yet. But every tongue knows this truth. Sour food doesn't kill you the way spoiled meat does. So the Victorians bottle a feeling, safety, and set it upon their tables like a captured star. A young woman with a wrinkled shawl offers you mangoes. You breathe and cough. They are not mangoes, of course. Mock mangoes, pickled melon died into another life. That is the second trick of the age, counterfeit elegance, thrift dressed as empire. The rich will parade a cut glass jar of true colonial fruit. Sun sailed across oceans. The poor will conjure the same glow with spice and dye. Between them stretches the long middle lane of aspiration, where families pickle because everyone else is pickling, and no one wants to look like yesterday. You drift and witness chutney recited like scripture, vinegar, salt, ginger, garlic, raisins, tamarind. Each spoonful claimed to cure indigestion and lovesickness with equal certainty. You bite a pickled walnut, a soft, peppered midnight in your mouth. You feel the city knit itself together by tang and sting. At taverns, pickled eggs sit beside ale like sentries. At bar counters, gentlemen tuck pickled onions into pockets the way others carry watch fobs. Recipes descend like heirlooms. One woman brags her vinegar has aged longer than her marriage. The bottles glow like family portraits, and yet the glow lies. Some sellers cheat the eye to preserve the illusion of summer. Copper sulfate to twist beans toward a fashionable green. Lead salts for a brightness that looks like health and tastes like ruin. The crowd does not shrink. Beauty can be persuasive. Hunger, more so. Fashion, the most persuasive of all. The Victorians do not only eat pickles, they perform them. In dining rooms, jars are centerpieces. In magazines, vinegar arts get columns and compliments. At county fairs, there are awards for crispness, clarity, courage. In this maze of brine and glass, status swings on a hinge of acid. Now listen carefully. Beneath the market's rattle is a quieter sound, the hush of logic that has not yet found language. People don't know bacteria, not by name, but they know a household can live or die by what it eats. They know that sharpness survives where sweetness sours, so they sanctify sourness. Safety becomes sacred. That is the third trick of the age, the ritual of reassurance. To pickle is to breathe against the dark with your hands. Still, something twitches in the jar of progress. A housewife boasts of her rarest specimens, nasturtium seeds in vinegar, gooseberries soaked in wine and alum. A man lifts a jar like a reliquary and whispers of his traveler's chutney that heals the heart. The line between pantry and display case vanishes. Food becomes collectible. Pickles become curated time. You begin to understand that Victorians are building a museum you can eat, where each mouthful announces, I am careful, I am current, I am safe, but the museum leaks. The copper-laced green, the lead-tipped gloss, small violences bright as jewels. Even so, the crowd keeps buying, keeps bottling, keeps believing. Why? Because in a century of fog and fever, of wages that shrink and chimneys that swell, a jar is a promise you can hold. A jar says, not today, not my house, not my child. When at last you step from the market, vinegar has perfumed your clothes. You carry it with you like a charm. Behind you the jars glisten, little lighthouses of the stomach. Ahead the city opens into other rooms, other rituals, where food pulls on masks more startling than dyed melon. But remember what you've learned in the vinegar labyrinth, for it is the key in every other lock. The Victorians aren't just eating. They are warding. They are weaving safety, status, and self into forms that wobble and gleam. And yes, sometimes the potion is poison. The spell does not always know what it summons. The age proceeds anyway, jar in hand, trusting the shine. The staircase creaks like a throat clearing. You enter a dim bedroom that smells of lavender water and boiled linen, of worry steeped overnight. A woman lies pale against pillows, her breath thin as thread. On a tray beside her floats a shipwreck, toast water, tepid liquid stained by a solitary crust. It's meant to soothe, to take the edge off a fever. Welcome to the Victorian sick room, where flavor is a suspect and gentleness a doctrine. A doctor, mustache bristling, prescribes beef tea. It sounds hearty until the kettle speaks. What arrives is water embarrassed by a bone, strained, see-through, hailed as nourishment precisely because it is almost not there. Panada follows, bread boiled into surrender, stirred to a paste and proudly unseasoned. If this feels like a ceremony, it is. The patient is to be kept calm, the digestion bored into obedience. Too much taste might excite the pulse. Too much salt might inflame the humors. What feeds is less important than what does not disturb. Blandness here is not accident. It is moral decor. Elsewhere a recipe hangs above the hearth. Gruel for a delicate constitution. Oats are to be boiled until they forget themselves, strained until the memory of grain is tidy. If one is daring, a drop of lemon. Gentle is a golden word in this house. Gentle soups, gentle teas, gentle nights in which hunger is praised for minding its manners. A woman recovers on hot milk thickened with flour. Another is given a single cup of gelatin per day. Calves' feet transformed into invisible scaffolding. The body wastes while everyone compliments the wallpaper. You suspect uncomfortably that the ritual is working on the wrong problem. Beneath the quilts, diaries dream of opposite meals. One man recovering from tuberculosis writes that he would trade salvation for a kidney pie. Another confesses to dreaming of a sausage roll. A servant dismissed for her kindness whispers that she once fed her mistress a spoon of blackberry jam and cool tea. The patient smiled, the only smile in days. The house called it dangerous. Mystery thickens. Travel now to confinement. The weeks after childbirth, a season named for its curtain. The room is dimmer here, the hush deeper. A newborn sleeps like a bundled sunrise. The mother sips egg wine, sherry warmed with raw yolk, nutmeg, and the promise of strength. She is told it will bring back the fire. A posset sighs on the tray. Cream and eggs curdled into a froth that tastes like a holiday misremembered. Brandy jelly glows amber in the dish, trembling slightly. Something between pudding and anesthesia. These are not meals. They are spells against weakness. Spells that numb and lace and lull. Solid food waits in a vestibule called later. The midwife approves. Manuals speak in blessings more than measurements. Let no meat pass her lips until the third day. Water, if boiled and cooled. Tea, if faint. Milk, if blessed with saffron. It is care, yes, but care written in the grammar of fear. The woman is a cathedral after lightning. Not to be jostled, not to be warmed, not to be stirred by spice. She must be rebuilt with quiet. You notice the cost. Spirits dim, cheeks hollow. A mother vanishes politely into her tonics and her sleep. In poorer rooms where there is no jelly, care becomes a cup of weak tea and the instruction to rest. Sometimes nothing at all. Bodies that have heaved out life are asked to live on the idea of strength. Yet the logic holds its thread. Nothing must offend the tender system. Gentle, gentle, gentle until the word becomes a veil over hunger. Step back. Hear the house whisper its theology. Food is not chosen for what it gives, but for what it refrains from taking. Pleasure is peril. Appetite suspect. Silence curative. The century that bottles safety in vinegar also waters safety into soup, ladles it thin, and calls it virtue. And still, miracles slip through. A smile for jam, a sigh at salt. The body remembers itself with scandalous speed when allowed. When you leave, the hallway is quieter than the street. You carry with you two mirrors that face one another and multiply to the horizon. On one side, the fear of excitation. On the other, the hunger for life. Between them sits a tray where bread swims in water and shakes like a small boat. There is love in the room. There is harm, too. Often they wear the same apron. The door clicks. The house of whispers settles. Somewhere a kettle begins again. It is noon in a workhouse. Tin spoons click against tin bowls like rain on a roof you cannot fix. A man slides his ration toward you, a slice he calls bread. When you lift it, The loaf tells a different story. It crumbles strangely, sighs chalk, hides grit. Your teeth find something that should not crunch. Welcome to the empire of adulteration, where the staff of life is sawed and plastered. In the slums and institutions, bread is a wager. Millers and bakers, squeezed by price and praised for whiteness, learn to stretch flour with whatever makes a sack heavier and a crumb paler. Pipe clay, ground bone, powdered alum to bleach and tighten the dough. Even sawdust, cleaned, dried, a counterfeit cousin to wheat. The loaf emerges weighty, convincingly pale. Appearance has won the argument. The body will pay the fees later. Newspapers eventually learn the tune and sing exposés. They speak of blue bread, tinged by copper sulfate. They quote physicians who calculate how much alum a Londoner swallows in a week, more than a surgeon would use to treat wounds in a year. But for a long time, the city laughs and chews. Bread is daily, unquestioned, almost sacred. Trouble is the loaf looks so very clean. Follow the crumbs back to the mill, where the air is white enough to blind thought. Iron teeth grind, belts sigh. Shirtless men heft sacks and become ghosts as the flour clings to their sweat. The foreman nods toward a barrel marked simply, alum. Another says, supplement, and when you lean over it, something coarse and animal brushes your gaze. Hair, perhaps, or just a rumor that has become ingredient. Adds texture, someone jokes without smiling. Workers here swallow their livelihood by accident. White lung, they call it, a powdery death that climbs slowly, cough by cough. Some go blind, most go quiet. A boy of 15 unwraps a muffin from his lunch pail and offers you a bite. Proud the way one is proud of anything warm. Your teeth meet grit, he grins. Happens a lot. Look at the sacks before they leave. Country hearth, snow wheat, London pure, names that sound like Sunday. But the delivery manifest sends the prettiest flour west, to streets with names and coal that burns politely. The rest, this clever, stretched whiteness, travels to prisons, poorhouses, and neighborhood bakeries where bellies are obliged to be grateful. Branding becomes a lullaby sung over an empty cradle. Not every baker is a villain. Not every miller cheats. But the structure itself leans like a drunk toward deception. Bleach, bulk, brighten, repeat, until the loaf slices without crumbling and glows faintly under candlelight. The whiter the crumb, the higher the status. Brown bread is for animals and peasants. Pure means pale. It is an old superstition in a new suit. The century measures virtue by the shade of a slice. In a corner of the mill, a worker stirs something acrid into the flour. Blue vitriol, he says, like a dare. He shrugs at your stare. A machine spits filings into the stream when its teeth are poorly kept. A rat falls into the grain and becomes story. Sweepings from the warehouse floor find second lives. Inspectors will uncover larvae baked into loaves, and the city will gasp as if it did not suspect. Then the city will forget. And what of the tongues? That must compromise? In the courtyard of the workhouse, a man flicks a pebble from his mouth and says, "Better than nothing." He is not wrong. He is not right. The loaf does not sustain, it delays collapse. The virtue posters on the wall call bread the staff of life, and for thousands the phrase is still true. If by staff you mean a stick you lean on when you cannot keep walking. You think of the market's shining jars. There safety was trapped in glass. Here danger is dressed in snow. Both trust the eye too much. Both move faster than law. Both make money whisper blessings over hunger. And yet, the crust still smells. Like home when it warms. Hands still break it with ritual. Children dunk it into weak tea and call it supper. When you leave the mill, your coat is powdered. You clap and it lingers, a ghost that refuses dismissal. On the river, a barge bears sacks toward neighborhoods whose windows fog quickly. In the west, a carriage carries finer flour to breakfast rooms where sunlight sits on porcelain. The same word, bread, circles both houses. The same prayer, enough, lives behind both doors. But the loaves are not the same, and the bodies know. Night finds you in a parlor lit by gaslight that makes silk look like quiet water. The hostess smiles with a conspirator's warmth. "Mock turtle," she says, and the servants bring bowls whose steam smells like borrowed luxury. You know the trick. There is no turtle here. Only a calf's head boiled to give its cheek and tongue a new name. Eggs are chopped into the illusion of shells. The broth is thickened to a texture the tongue remembers from somewhere expensive. This is not deceit to harm. It is theater to belong. Victorian middle-class dinner tables learned a grammar of mimicry. Real turtle soup, imported and aristocratic, is a price-tagged miracle. So the aspiring household composes a hymn in its honor with local notes. Mock venison, mutton marinated in wine and juniper, then rested for days until the shy of game appears. Mock goose, potato and breadcrumbs sculpted into a bird and dressed in cabbage leaves for its Sunday best. Mock fish, pounded rice and anchovy essence pressed into a mold with spinach for skin. Guests clap with their eyebrows. The performance is clever, and cleverness is the coin of the room. Cookbooks bless the movement with whole sections, economical imitations, artful substitutes. Mrs. Beaton gives you confidence. A dozen magazines cheer you on. Here is the fourth trick of the age: food as a ventriloquist. You speak the language of class through texture and silhouette. The taste aims as close as budgets allow. The shape says the rest. We know the song. We can play it too. Sometimes the theater winks. In a club of amateur wits, a mock turtle banquet leans so hard into the gag that laughter trembles the silver. Pig's foot jelly thickens the soup to an aggressively honest wobble. A gentleman pokes with his spoon and says, "One never knows where tongue ends and cheek begins." The room applauds the line as if it were a toast. But beneath the merriment, a thinner, more anxious music plays. Respectability is a costume that must be kept pressed. A failed imitation can cost a maid her post, or a household its fragile foothold. Weddings sometimes stack mock cakes, papier-mâché layers iced in plaster, with a single edible wedge hidden for bride and groom. From the doorway, the spectacle looks perfect. From the knife's edge, thrift is revealed. No one says a word. Admiration is the guest of honor. Supper becomes a guessing game. What isn't it? People ask. The truth, when revealed, delights. Cleverness redeemed by candor. Children learn the sport early, shaping their first oysters from liver and onion. A hostess beams as a fish made of rice outswims rumor. The dining room swells with relief. We have done the ritual. We have made a feast from fractions. We are, if you squint kindly, the sort of people who eat turtle. Now and then the stagehands overreach. A menu may promise a miracle and deliver confusion. A potato bird too earnest, a mutton deer too melancholy. A blancmange that wobbles toward existential questions. Someone jokes about mock mayonnaise made of mashed potato and vinegar. Someone else confides that the most convincing dish she ever served was mock ham, dyed with cochineal until it blushed like the idea of pork. You are tempted to sneer. Resist. What you are seeing is not a lie, but a longing. The century's engines grind, its factories sing, its streets narrow and widen with fortunes that change like weather. In such air, imitation becomes a kind of prayer. Let us have a seat, if not, at the great table, then at a shadow of it. Let us feed our friends something that tastes like a rival. When the evening breaks for dessert, a pink wobble arrives. Mock blancmange, milk and flour perfumed with almond, set in a mold that holds the light like an obedient pond. It trembles as if listening for its real name. Guests tap it gently with spoons and declare it delicate. Delicacy is currency. Everyone leaves the room slightly richer in the coin that matters here: approval. And yet the theater knows its limits. Behind the door marked aristocratic spectacle, stranger performances wait. The roast peacock, with its dyed tail reattached, the lamprey pie glossy as a river's secret, the ambergris jelly that smells like the ocean remembering a whale. That is a different stage, where extravagance performs power rather than belonging. Tonight you have watched the Middle Kingdom at work, its courage, its craft, its soft panic. You step into the hall, the coats whisper as they brush. A guest murmurs that next week she will attempt mock oysters. Another says she plans to pass off dried apples as minced meat. You look back at the table where the soup cooled into its second skin and feel something tender stir. It isn't mockery. It is respect. For the hands that translated hunger into a joke that did not cut, for the mouths that laughed while swallowing truth. The door closes on the parlor, and with it the night's applause. On the street the fog rolls like curtain smoke, and the city prepares its next act. The door to the boudoir opens like a jewelry box. Silk breathes. Light folds itself on mirrors, as if practicing to be skin. A lady reclines in a velvet chair with the gravity of a saint and the appetite of a star. On her tongue, a white wafer softens like a secret. The box calls them complexion wafers. The city calls them fashionable. You know their older name, arsenic. Only a whisper, says the saleswoman. A fraction of a grain. Enough to quiet freckles and coax a pearly hush to the cheeks. Enough to let the face hold light as though each pore were a window. She sells the promise in a tone priests reserve for absolution. Pale means leisure. Pale means safety from sun and soil and the urgencies of work. Pale is the costume of gentility, and the century adjusts the lamps to flatter it. On the dressing table, white lead powder like fallen snow. Belladonna drops to widen the eyes until they dream awake. A green bottle wrapped in silk. Fowler's solution. Liquid arsenic in its Sunday clothes. The labels speak in a gentle grammar. Tonic, nerve settler, digestive aid. The hands that lift them tremble with reverence and a hint of something else. You watch the ritual. Dusting, dabbing, a sip, a smile. Beauty is assembled like a reliquary. And yet the mirror keeps its own account. A glow that doesn't belong to blood. A stillness in the fingertips that has nothing to do with grace. Victorian London sells arsenic with lace at the counter, and advice whispered like gossip. Take just so much and no more. Chase it with vinegar to tighten the skin. A social contract cooked in a chemist's pan. So long as the dose is careful, the face will be immaculate, the self untroubled, the glance unearthly. The price is paid in small installments, a tingle, a numbness, gums that blush the wrong color. But these are private coins, easy to hide in a handkerchief. The city's hunger for color complicates the plot. Arsenic slips from the dressing table to the sweet shop, from a cosmetics glow to the emerald of a candy leaf. Wallpaper inhales it into drawing rooms in a shade too perfect to be innocent. The century's cravings braid themselves. The room must look like spring and winter. The cake must look like a garden. The skin must look like porcelain. Each desire reaches for the same powder. There are stories that should be whispered low. A fashionable party where almond blossoms topping a cake were colored with the wrong green. Guests became pale in a way no painter meant. Apothecaries worn in winks, but business is brisk. The countryside, you will hear of men who take arsenic too. Small doses to warm the chest, to step farther before the lungs complain. A culture of careful poison blooms and the body pretends not to notice. Back in the salon, the magazine pictures a face like candlelight through milk. That's the look, the lady sighs, the look of having just survived a poem. The century celebrates fragility as if it were a sacrament. To be seen is to be judged, and the easiest way not to be judged is to vanish attractively at the edges. Arsenic offers an elegant border. The world's outlines soften. Your own become legend. You feel the temptation as it is meant to be felt. The promise to be untouchable in a city that touches everything, to be polished in a place that smears, to be quiet in a room of clang. The wafer sits on your palm like a white lie that is practiced for the stage. The maid watches. The mistress smiles, luminous and far away. You do not take it. Not because you are braver than the age, but because you have seen enough spells today to respect their teeth. When you step outside, the air of vinegar and coal finds you again. The perfume of arsenic hangs behind like an opinion. You imagine the city at night, bedroom windows becoming pale planets, each woman a moon deciding how much of herself to show. This is the fifth trick of the age. To make danger delicate, to package peril as poise, to turn the body's faintness into fashion, and to hope that the ledger in the mirror never comes due. The street swallows you whole. Somewhere a chemist locks a door with trembling hands. The sweet shop is a chapel. Jars to the ceiling shine like choir voices. Children crowd the window. their breath drawing cloudy halos over emeralds and rubies that heap in glass. The bell tinkles. The floorboards answer. The shopkeeper scoops a constellation of candies into a paper twist. Not too quick, he chuckles. That green lingers, emerald. The color of fields after rain. The color of holidays. The color, too, of copper arsenite powdered into beauty and whisked into sugar. The century wants brightness. Dyes oblige. Pink lozenges glow with the friendly blush of lead. Vermilion drops burn with a mercurial red. Prussian blue deepens navy with the alchemy of iron and cyanide. None of this is screamed from a label. The powders arrive with tidy names, vegetable, mineral, harmless, and shopkeepers with honest faces believe what the invoices sing. A girl slips a green drop onto her tongue and shows it off, proud of the frog belly stain. Laughter spills down the curb and into the gutter, where it refuses to touch the shadows. You do not laugh. You have read the clippings. Bradford, where a confectioner mistook arsenic-laced daft for sugar. The town learned a hard word in a hurry, and yet within a year the jars were bright again. Hunger for joy makes a fast truce with memory. Not all trickery is chemical. Some licorice is deepened with boot polish. Some toffee given a false sheen with coal byproducts. Some acid drops lean into their name with an enthusiasm that leaves the tongue aching. Street carts clatter through schoolyards with black jacks and barley sugar, brick dusted for bite. Children trade sweets as currency. Marbles for a ribbon of treacle. A story for a sugar mouse. A blue tongue is a banner. A sticky hand is proof of a day one. Upstairs in a parlor above a tea shop, three sisters dust silver shimmer onto violet pastilles. The tin says pearl essence. The shimmer comes partly from fish scales and the kind of compounds that make a chemist frown. The effect under gaslight is exquisite. No one asks questions that would flatten the magic. Recipes pass from mother to daughter intact, including their errors. The traveling supplier, faithful for decades, has a smile that could sell snow in January. There is no villain in this scene larger than appetite and speed. The empire is a river of color and sweets hurry to keep up. A teacher scolds children for tongue-stained navy, but does not map the trail from glaze to stomach. Parents blame fog or stew or childhood itself when little ones wake dizzy. The word poison belongs to stories. The word treat belongs to kitchens. It is difficult to trade their places without breaking a heart. You step into the alley and the sugar smell follows, sweet over coal and cabbage. Your shoes find grit. A boy offers you a licorice pipe, pretending to smoke like his father's portrait, then eats it with the triumphant lawlessness of youth. He holds his palm out. You pay the penny. For a moment, the transaction feels like tithing, a small gift to laughter. This is the rainbow without rules, the carnival of color that arrived before the traffic officer. Eventually, the city will put a clerk behind the counter and make him carry a stamp of approval. Eventually, chemists will name the powders and point at their shadows. But for now, the jars are a planetarium of flavors and risks rotating at child height. And the stars are so pretty you could forget to look where you step. As you leave, a little boy grins with a mouth rimed black, then vanishes into fog. It is not your job to chase him. It is your job to remember what he carried, a happiness too cheap to question, a sweetness bright enough to hide its own edges. The bell tinkles. Somewhere, in another district, a mother ties a ribbon around a paper twist and calls it a present. The present shines. The kitchen is barely a corner, hearth, cracked sink, a pot that believes it is the only furniture required for survival. In the basin, something moves. It is not your reflection. An eel loops itself like a ribbon learning to write its name. The woman of the house pours more water with a mother's patience. Let him soak the river out, she says, rolling up sleeves that have been rolled forever. Victorian London has an arrangement with eels. They are coin that stays fresh in your pocket. They live until you need them. They cost what a bad day can afford. Stalls in Bethnal Green sing their bright, repetitive song. Live eels. Wrigglers, fat ones, slippy ones. The eel man's cart is a stage. Metal trays, wet straw, a hand that grabs without flinching. Customers clap coins down, choose with a finger, carry supper home alive. You watch the ritual in the flat. A knife swift and certain. A pot that listens better than most men. No herbs, perhaps a pinch of salt, an onion peel like a rumor. As the collagen melts, The broth begins to thicken into its own winter. When it cools, it will set, not a jelly born of gelatine in a packet, but the eel's body returning as architecture. Served cold with vinegar, maybe parsley if a week has been kind, it is rich in a way that can embarrass a tenement. You taste, slippery and firm, fish and ash, a sauce that never learned to flow. Call it jellied eels and be done, or walk farther and find that even this dish learns manners in the right neighborhood. In certain taverns, the eel turns silver-plated. The jelly sets in molds shaped like crowns and swans and private jokes. Slices are garnished with eggs and parsley confetti. Aspic, that empire of patience, welcomes eel as an honored cousin. It is still Tuesday's supper in the alley, and Saturday's hors d'oeuvre in the club. The mouth recognizes both as true. There are pies, thick crust, thick gravy. Heads sometimes left in as if the creature wanted one more look at the party. There are stories of boys who lead pet eels on string until a mother ends the experiment with boiling water, and the kind of sigh that changes a room. There is the river itself, the Thames, a patient factory that sends up meat where other farms fail. A stallholder tells you river eels taste better. Grew up mean, he says, and smiles like a slogan. The dangers are ordinary rather than theatrical. If not cleaned just so, the meat turns bitter and education arrives by the worst teacher. Kitchens that flirt with filth invite troubles that do not wear convenient names. But blaming the eel feels like blaming the moon for the tide. Food safety is an art the century has not fully learned to draw. And most families work at the level of prayer. Keep, spare, preserve. Don't let the small ones wake hungry. The eelman's chant follows you down the street. You watch a girl carry a bucket that sloshes against her shins. She doesn't know whether tonight will be supper or a race. In a hungry city, play and survival sometimes use the same props. A few blocks away, a gentleman curls a fork into a quivering aspic and decides he prefers his eels when they've forgotten their face. This is not a story about a monster that crept into a sink. It is a story about a river that found a way to visit a house. Meat that brings its own glue. Protein that forgives the absence of spice. A creature that, for a few coins and an hour's heat, will turn into tomorrow morning's breakfast without asking for more than a basin and a blade. When you leave, the basin is quiet. The pot is not. Steam writes invisible letters against a window the landlord hasn't meant to repair. The woman stirs and hums, the way women stir and hum when clocks are unkind. Somewhere an eelman counts coins. Somewhere a tavern unmolds a perfect dome and calls it refinement. Somewhere a boy ties a string and waits for a mother's footsteps. You step into the night and feel the city wriggle around your ankles. Something in it is patient. Something in it is salt. Pall Mall and St. James's are theater districts of a different kind. Curtains are velvet, dialogues hushed, applause measured in eyebrow height. You enter a dining room where portraits watch and decanters glow like bottled mahogany. The steward announces the special, and the room offers a small, knowing murmur. Brains on toast. The platter arrives, elegant as a legal argument. The slices tremble, half custard, half conviction, spooned onto crisp triangles glossed with anchovy butter. A gentleman at your elbow advises speed. Best eaten hot, he says. One doesn't want them setting. He says it the way a man says charge without lifting his voice. You taste. The texture is a quiet rebellion. The idea is louder. Courage but plated. Tripe, marrow, kidneys split and hissing in mustard. Sheep's head stew that presents its history in the curve of a jawbone. Ox cheek braised into silk and given a French accent so that no one blushes to love it. These are not the scraps of poverty tonight. They are the vocabulary of nerve. The poor ate them to survive. The rich eat them to prove they can. A barrister declares eggs are for invalids. Liver, he says, wakes the blood. Another requests head cheese with the satisfied smile of a traditionalist ordering the anthem. A raconteur describes marrow pudding delicate as a rumor. You look around and understand that flavor, while welcomed, is not the main entertainment. The real course is character. Here the empire practices itself at table, consuming whole animals, naming their geographies, insisting that nothing essential be spared, provided it arrives with silver tongs and a French noun. Mock turtle appears again, this time in porcelain shaped like its inspiration, enriched with sherry and little slivers of egg and brain that wink at the joke. Laughter is brief. No one wants to admit that the joke tells the truth. Imitation as achievement? Endurance as taste. Cross town, a man gnaws chalked bread and calls it supper. In this room, a man eats kidney for breakfast and calls it discipline. The ingredient does not define the meaning. The room does. That is the century's sleight of hand performed nightly. Poor houses call awful necessity. Clubs call it grit. Both are correct. Both are prisoners of their plates. You listen to the talk ripple. Someone speaks of a campaign, someone else of a scandal. A third of a cook he dismissed for serving ox tongue 3 nights running. Not because the dish offended, but because repetition did. Variety is a virtue here, even when the inventory of animals doesn't change. The tongue learns different adjectives. The cheek different chords. The kidneys arrive last as if to test the room's stamina. They sizzle. They perfume the air with an argument between mustard and memory. A man in a paisley waistcoat pronounces the moment fortifying. You taste and the metal of the organ tarries on your tongue, insisting that food can be an iron handshake. It would be easy to scoff. It would be easy to preach. Better to notice the true ritual beneath the silver, a society that fears softness, and therefore eats sharpness to declare itself awake. A class that dreads repetition and therefore performs novelty on top of the same old muscle and bone. A century that turns appetite into emblem, then reads the emblem as prophecy. A man who can eat a kidney can govern, someone almost says. No one laughs. They don't have to. The creed is served with the claret. When at last you step into the corridor, the gaslight makes your reflection look braver than you feel. Through a door you glimpse a domed aspic flecked with quail eggs, the night's final statement trembling with self-respect. You think of the tenement kitchen where jelly formed by accident, not ambition. And the distance between those two quivers is the measure of the city. Outside, the lamps are a procession. Somewhere a baker wipes grit from his tongue. Somewhere a chemist labels a tonic invigorating and means loud. Somewhere a man finishes a meal of cold beef in a factory canteen and calls it strength. You file the tastes away like stories you might need later. The city requires many kinds of courage. Some are swallowed. Some are chewed. The club door clicks shut. London exhales. Your mouth remembers everything, and suddenly you are not hungry, and somehow you are. The house is breathing in whispers. Curtains drawn, lavender lingering like a prayer that forgot its words. You are guided into a parlor where the chairs have learned to sit solemnly, and even the fireplace seems to hush its crackle. On the table, a white plate trimmed in black ribbon stacked with biscuits. Each is oval, pale with a gloss of sugar, and wrapped in paper printed with a name. Curled letters, a date, a life pressed into ink. You take one. It is dry as dust and tender as memory. Tea moves around the room, but it is unadorned. Black, unsweetened, unmilked. Sugar would be a celebration. Today is a bridge. Manners hold the scene together the way stitches hold a wound. Cups rise, eyes lower, and conversation flows in small threads that never snag. Weather, the roses, the hymn. No one speaks the name on the wrappers, but it is everywhere, rustling softly whenever a hand turns the paper. A woman at your elbow leans close and murmurs of spirit hunger, the old idea that the newly departed still hover, not unkindly, until the household has eaten in their honor and set a place for absence itself. Some families leave bread and salt on the sill, a courtesy to the invisible guest. Others follow older currents. You hear of the corpse cake, spiced and dense, laid upon the chest of the dead while candles keep watch. Later the cake is sliced and shared, its sweetness believed to carry the last warmth of a life into the mouths that loved it. In a corner, a ribboned parcel is prepared for each visitor, another biscuit to take home. These tokens are tucked into family Bibles, slid under pillows, saved in drawers, little reliquaries of flour and sugar that refuse to be eaten. The edges crack over the years like river mud in a summer field, and still the paper remembers the curve of a body that once sat at this table. Mourning has a pantry. Grief is rationed. Not every ritual is gentle. Beyond the city, in valleys ribbed with stone walls and on moors where wind writes in heather, the tale moves in darker syllables. A poor man, a stranger, a chosen outsider, is invited to the threshold where the body lies. Bread and ale are placed upon the chest or beside the shrouded face. He eats in silence. He drinks, eyes lowered. For a few coins, he is paid to swallow what cannot otherwise be swallowed, the sins the family hopes to lift. When he leaves, the door closes quickly, as though draft or judgment might follow. He will not be thanked in the daylight, but the path to the churchyard will be a fraction lighter for those who step behind the bier. He eats to be despised. He eats so others can be loved. The parish will forget him. The bread will not. Etiquette books, those tightropes across which the age walks so carefully, prescribe the menus of sorrow. White soup for a widow's luncheon, mild and pale as resignation. Cold meats for guests, never a dish too vigorous or red. Cakes for grief are not shaped and firm, giving the jaw something to do when the heart would rather not. In certain houses, a wheel of death cheese is kept in the cellar across the years, opened like a bell when someone crosses the threshold between was and is not. It tastes of stone and distance, food that remembers the first name it heard and all the others layered on top. Yet grief is not beyond fashion. There are mourning chocolates wrapped in black foil and delivered with cards. There are embossed invitations to funeral luncheons where wine is pale and laughter practiced to be brief. Somewhere, a hostess sighs in relief that the rules exist at all. They keep hands steady. They keep weeping to the correct rooms. When the tea is finished, you take your leave with that paper parcel in your pocket, the weight of a biscuit made heavier by a printed name. Outside, the street seems to blink in the gray light. A shawl of drizzle settles on the railings. You pass the churchyard where stones lean like tired men. It is easy to imagine the sin-eater's footsteps threading between them. Easy to imagine the taste of bread that is more than bread. Back home, you place the little package in a drawer. You mean to keep it for a week, perhaps a month. It will remain for years. On another night, when the house is quiet and the clock ticks with the sturdy patience of the living, you will touch the paper and feel how starch can hold a story. Food for the unseen. Sweetness for a silence that loved fiercely. A ritual that teaches the hands to do something when the mouth has no words. This is how the century eats its sorrow. Politely, symbolically, with recipes that ask spirits to sit and stay a while. The biscuit waits light as bone. The name waits heavier. Somewhere across hills and hedges, a man who eats sin sleeps without dreams. And in the morning, the city will wake, boil the kettle, and pass the plate again. The sea announces itself before it is seen, a clean salt insistence that turns faces toward the wind. You have arrived where Londoners come to be rinsed. Margate, Brighton, a promenade stitched with striped tents and parasols peering like flowers. Children write their names in sand that cannot remember. Nurses shepherd them away from waves that pretend to forget where the shore is. On a chalkboard outside a tea room, the menu glitters with strangeness. Mutton jelly, iced tongue, savory veal cream. A bell tinkles when you enter, and the room lifts its face like porcelain. Gas hissed into kettles, china sighing on saucers, and a matron in pearls who offers you, with pride, a chilled silver dish that trembles as though it has learned the etiquette of fear. Mutton jelly, she says, made fresh this morning. It wobbles with dignity. You taste. The mouth receives spring in a butcher's shop. Cold, gently greasy, precise. If your tongue expects sweetness, it must learn another season. The Victorians adore jellies, especially the ones that behave. Aspic is not just cooking. It is choreography. Bones surrender to time and heat. Patience coaxes clarity from cloud. A stock becomes cathedral glass. Perfect aspic is the taste of control, the house announcing that its hours are well stitched. Soon you begin to notice the logic. Cold calms. The age fears excitements, not only in the mind but along the mysterious avenues of digestion. Hot food stirs blood, distracts organs, calls the nerves to a parade. Cold food composes. Ladies praise the way a chilled veal cream sits morally. Doctors nod at gelatin as a soothing scaffold for bodies that have forgotten how to stand. Even pleasure is asked to enunciate quietly. At another table, a girl scrapes her spoon along what looks like strawberry sorbet. Rosy, pretty, a dessert that leaned toward summer. Her face folds. It is beetroot and beef fat, dyed and frozen into the wrong promise. Mother hushes disappointment. Health is an acquired taste. You keep your expression advice-shaped and sample something billed as gravy ice. Beef broth clarified, seasoned, gelled. shaved into a cone and offered as refreshment. Your mouth negotiates, ice houses and early freezers hum behind these novelties. Kitchen maids in wool shawls carry glistening molds like reliquaries to windowsills where sea air finishes a prayer. Picnics along the cliff produce towers of aspic layered with ham, egg slices, parsley, coins of carrot. The transparent geology of a household's leftovers elevated to nobility. A stout woman announces aspic à la royale, and no one laughs because it is. Aspic molds are sold like hopes. Fish, baskets of flowers, little castles capable of wobbling in a breeze without capitulating. In certain hotels, a savory ices supper is advertised with alto notes of bravado. Potted fowl mousse in frosted goblets, lemoned consommé in sherbet glasses, a custard of bone marrow leaned into with nutmeg. Somewhere a chef experiments with sardine gelato and learns the limits of a century's courage. The failure does not appear in the brochure. This gelatinous empire is not nonsense to those who serve it. A clear jelly announces a clean kitchen, a patient cook, an order that refuses ruin. It shows the household has time to refine and space to cool, a sermon of status rivaling any silverware. When the dish arrives perfect and translucent, modeled like a church window with herbs and bits of meat, the table sees more than supper. It sees proof. You step outside. Gulls write exclamation points over the surf. The platter you just survived continues to tremble in your imagination. You understand why. Aspic is a moralized mirror, a wobble that holds, a vessel where the chaotic has been persuaded into quiet, a way to eat the idea of restraint, spoon by careful spoon. On the promenade, a man finishes a paper cone of gravy ice as if virtue had a melting point. Children chase the rim of the tide like cats learning shadow. You pass a hotel where the dining room windows reveal an aspic tower with sprigs of dill nodding in lemon jelly, light passing through it as though it were not entirely food. Later someone will praise the firmness, someone else the gentility of temperature. You will remember the glimmer, how even the sea seemed briefly to admire a dish that could move without moving. By evening, the beach empties. Shells resume their studies of silence, and the wind puts its finger to its lips. In that hush, you can imagine the city's other dinners boiling and shouting. Here, plates whisper. Here, the cold is a spell. Here, the wobble is not a weakness. It is a promise that desire can be persuaded into grace, at least until the spoon arrives. In a back kitchen, a scullery maid stirs something that glugs like a lantern trying to speak. It is syrup, though that word is two different doors depending on the handle you can afford. On the shelf, a tin stamped with a lion and a verse bright as hymnlight. Golden syrup, smooth, obedient, a middle-class halo poured onto porridge and respectability. Beside it, a jar tied with string and stained with use. Blackstrap, the treacle that clings like a shadow. One is sunlight, one is smoke. The maid tastes the dark spoonful and winces. She adds flour the way a violinist tightens a string. We make do, she says, which is a recipe with 1,000 variations in the same last line. You learn that treacle, in the alley's tongue trial, is not only for puddings and sticky tarts, not only for parking cakes and bonfire nights. It is a survival glaze, spread on stale crusts to convince a child that hunger is a kind of flavor, thinned to sweeten water, boiled to silence a room for a few minutes. It paints mouths black and buys a brief peace. Walk down to the docks where the refinery breathes steam and money. In copper pans, raw sugar boils itself toward a story the empire prefers to tell. Clarity, control, a sweetness without splinters. That story becomes tins of gold for certain streets and battered barrels of residue for others. Laborers heave the heavy black from vats and scrape the walls. Their boots pull away from floors with a sound like regret. Outside, a cart rattles to Whitechapel. A mother brings a chipped jug and does not flinch at the grit drifting on the surface. For the little ones, she says, and the clerk nods as though selling candles. Across town, a breakfast table rehearses the gentle ritual of the fortunate. Cut triangles of toast perfume, the air with butter. Golden syrup threads warm light over cream. Someone laughs softly about how treacle stains. The word becomes an endearment, my treacle. In parlors with carpets. Meanwhile, in alleys, treacle hardens bricks, shines boots, then returns to a saucepan and finds a second life in a child's mouth. The same syllables with different weights. Sweets on the curb sparkle with the black stuff. Trickle sticks snapped from cooling stones. Black jacks wrapped in newspaper. Children swapping a lick for a marble. Teeth learn to bargain. A boy offers you a thick square. It glues your jaw in a pact you did not sign. He grins with a gap like a coin slot. You pay the toll of a penny and consider it fair. If syrup draws the line between sunlight and shadow, cold beef draws the line of the workday itself. Noon in a factory canteen is an iron metronome. Tin boxes open with a soldierly click. Out come slices of Sunday's roast turned Monday's lunch, Tuesday's scrap, Wednesday's hash, by Thursday, pickled, and by Friday, a story told by bread alone. Men sit shoulder to shoulder and eat as if the clock had teeth. Here is British energy as the century wants to picture it. Gray slices, serviceable. A pickled onion like a punctuation mark, a wedge of cheese sweating courage. Sometimes a thick slice of dripping, bread married to last night's cooled fat, devoured with a private smile that would be a confession in a different room. Conversation is rationed. From Smithfield, one man boasts of his cut, and someone else swears his is Lincolnshire. Friendly tribalism in mustard tones. On railway platforms, clerks lift neat sandwiches from paper, sprinkle salt like an idea of snow, and consult their newspapers to see whether the nation still believes beef makes character. Boys in brick red caps ferry baskets holding essentially the same meal, repeated across classes, geography and weather. Etiquette men with careful pens even recommend coldness. Hot lunches excite, they whisper. Cold meat fortifies. A slogan hides inside the sandwich. Beef is Britain. And so the jaw keeps time with an empire that is equal parts appetite and schedule. Of course, shadows crease the bread. You remember the mill where flour learned to imitate itself, brightened and bulked until a loaf looked like a promise too heavy to hold. Sawdust chalk alum, whiteness at any cost. In poor houses, crusts crumble oddly and stick to the gums like a nagging thought. But in lunchrooms where the whistle owns the minute hand, men call their meals by simpler names. If it fills, it is good. If it lasts, it is wise. If it is beef, it is almost pride. Even in the monotony, there are small rebellions. A pickled walnut that bites back. Mustard smuggled in a tin like contraband cheer. A day when someone risks mock goose or a curry and tells the story for weeks. Mostly, though, the creed remains. Bite, swallow, return. The machines resume their percussion. Tin lids close with small iron sunsets. The day continues, practical as a boot. By evening, treacle still stains the sleeve you forgot to roll. It will not wash out tonight. It lingers like a lesson. Sweetness has neighborhoods. Strength has recipes. You wipe your hands on a towel that already knows this. In the window, your reflection is rimmed in gold at one edge and dark at the other, as though syrup itself has learned a kind of weather. Somewhere, kettles are set for tea. Somewhere, knives worry the last slice into two. The city eats what it must and calls it virtue, and sometimes it is. A door swings open on velvet hinges and you step into a dining room arranged like a sermon. Candles wash the silver in chapel light. Bottles stand at attention as if about to be sworn in. At the head of the table, Dr. Horace Willoughby, mustache waxed, smile upholstered, raises a vial. Tonight, he pronounces, we eat for longevity. The guests applaud like patients. Courses arrive married to cures. Vegetable soup with purifying drops. Thin, metallic, as if the spoon had remembered a key. Fish sluiced with digestive essence. Tangy and reminiscent of a cupboard you should not open. Beefsteak marinated in tonic wine fortified with quinine and phosphoric something that glows like an idea in the mouth. Testimonials bloom between bites. A gentleman whose gout retreated under electric powders dusted on cutlets. A lady who sleeps heroically on 2 hours thanks to lozenges that taste suspiciously of opium in afternoon. Glasses are filled with invigorating cordial that turns tongues brave and then numb. Dessert appears under a flourish, a liver-shaped jelly, amber and anatomically earnest. The room laughs discreetly and eats prayerfully. Sample bags are distributed, flesh pills that promise pleasing plumpness, nerve syrup for thoughts that tremble, charcoal for the stomach's regrets. The century's faith in labels is a cathedral with many doors. You step out dizzy from the fragrance of certainty. Morning finds you at another threshold, the soup kitchens. The line speaks in coughs and the scrape of boots. Inside, the vat of gruel murmurs its pale arithmetic. Enough to quiet, not enough to spark. Bowls are placed without ceremony. Spoons are lifted with the particular dignity of those who have practiced. A small sign near the ladle translates charity into rules. No seconds without prayer. Tokens earned at the relief office by breaking stones or scrubbing steps. By admission to warmth and thin comfort. Someone once added parsley and lost their funding for frivolity. You carry a bucket of leftovers past two boys waiting, hopefully. For the pigs, the worker says, and the boys do not argue. The pamphlet tucked beneath your bowl suggests that abstaining from meat will calm the soul and purify the ledger. You think of how hunger looks when it is made moral. Cheeks that learn not to expect. Stomachs that become polite. The door closes behind you with the soft certainty of a rule that has no name for mercy other than measured ladles. There is yet another table laid elsewhere, in a house where furniture sits upright like theology. The host is a vital hygienist, not a physician, but a believer who wants the stomach to resemble the soul he admires. Breakfast, cold porridge and raw apple peel. Lunch, lentils boiled until the calendar blurs. Dinner, preferably not. Water carries a sermon. Barley refuses sugar. Salt is a rumor. He presses into your hand a graham biscuit. The original, unsweet and Protestant. A brick that intends to buttress virtue. The family choose purity. They take pride in a palate that does not answer when pleasure calls. You meet others who count chews. Fletcherists who ride each mouthful to 70 before a swallow earns its passport. Men whose faces are the color of fog and women who survive on cabbage water and commandments. A manual lists recipes. Celery boiled 6 times. Bread without yeast because vanity rises. In the pamphlets, the word delicious has been escorted to the door. Appropriate takes its chair. They do not starve, they say. They practice light. Perhaps both are true. Night returns you to spectacle, the highest rung of performance where food ceases to be food and becomes resume. A butler unveils peacock refeathered and lacquered into posed glory. A pie of lark tongues curtsies past. Calf's foot blancmange quivers like a polite ghost. Lamprey pie glistens with the memory of river mud and ancient kings. There is a pyramid of sugar roses, a marzipan queen with a mouth that will never speak, and somewhere a bowl of ambergris jelly smelling of sea and luxury. People gasp on cue. They do not necessarily eat. The feast is a mirror turned outward. Plates are poked, not emptied. A waiter trips and a tremor passes through the room as though elegance itself had slipped. Conversation circles the event like a cautious moth round a lamp. Hunger would be vulgar. Joy, almost treason. The skill is in enduring wonder without confessing desire. Then the lights soften. A final dessert arrives. A blancmange so translucent you could read a letter through it, crowned with sugared violets and a pair of impossible hummingbirds. It is ridiculous and perfect, and designed to go untouched, because disappearing would break the spell. The room holds its breath. You can feel, in that shared hush, the whole age learning the line between appetite and appearance, and choosing the latter again. You walk home through streets that understand secrets. In your pocket is a folded wrapper from a morning biscuit. On your sleeve, a smear of treacle that refuses to let go. In your mouth, the memory of cold beef's stubborn grammar. On your tongue, a phantom tingle from a cordial that promised more than truth. In your head, the wobble of aspic and the steady hand that made it. You realize the strangest part was never the peacock or the eel, never the arsenic masquerading as grace, never the jelly that thought it was ice cream. The strangest part was why. The way food became prayer, costume, law, and lullaby. The kettle begins to sing somewhere near your heart. You dim the room in your mind, as Victorians loved to dim their lamps, and the city settles around you like a well-folded napkin. The last trembling hush of that invisible pudding still hangs in the air. You are full of stories, of shadows, of flavors that behaved like beliefs. Set the fork down. Let the strangeness fade to a glow. Tomorrow there will be simpler bread. Tonight you have eaten the century and it has told you who it wished to be.